I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at 4:38 p.m. Roll call, I have Alder Johnson, Alder Hinkfist, and myself in attendance, and Alder Galvin is absent.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Entertain approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Regular business number 1, consideration with possible action to accept the FEMA 2023 Fire Prevention and Safety Grant in the amount of $29,880.95. Any questions for staff?
Awesome job. Move to approve.
Yep. Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 2, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase of the Tyler's Systems LLC, a tailored Prop 2024 trailer vessel for a total cost of $54,237.50, grant funded. Any questions for staff?
Just clarity, because we've got a couple of these. I mean, this is all part of the grant, and so we're basically just authorizing it because it's over the expenditure threshold. Is that right?
Correct. Items 2 and 3 are that same grant. We received over over $430,000 as part of a hazardous materials trading prop grant, and so that covers items 2 and 3.
Great. Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Number 3, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase for WHP Training Towers, a Sourcewell Modified Hazmat Instructor Series System for a total cost of $174,102 grant
Move to approve.
funded.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 4, consideration with possible action to approve the purchase from Conway Shield Paratech airlifting bags and accessories for a total cost of $57,930 funds from previous borrowing. Questions for staff?
Move to approve.
Chief, you look eager to talk, but we don't have to make you.
Yeah, they're airbags, they're extra
Yeah.
feature tools, so yep, okay.
Okay. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries.
Just trying to make your job a little easier
Yeah,
today.
thank you very much.
Number 5, consideration with possible action to approve 180-day planning option to Smet Construction Services for 15 acres of land located on Erie Road, parcel 21-199. Motion.
Staff want to provide an overview? You can ignore my voicemail.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're here. So.
Okay.
Rebecca, you want to introduce yourself? Yes, my name is Rebecca Finko. I'm the Economic Development Specialist here at the Community and Economic Development Department. To provide a bit of background, so in May 2024, the city purchased approximately 35 acres of land for an expansion of the Grandview Industrial Park located at the southeast intersection of East Main Street and Erie Road. This land is currently zoned rural residential with the intent to rezone it to industrial. Smet Construction Services is requesting a 180-day planning option for 15 acres on the southwest corner of that property, and that's representing a local company. The proposal would include 12,500 square feet of office space, 93,700 square feet of shop space, 8 loading docks, and parking for 40 employees. The exact location, I know this is a little bit different, but the exact location of that 15 acres is yet to be determined, contingent upon a certified survey map and further consultation with DPW and with the developer. The reason being that this property has not yet been parceled out. So we have to really have further conversation and consideration for the exact location based on the developer's needs, on potential expansion. There's some wetlands there that also have to be addressed. And then also keeping in mind the marketability and accessibility for future development. So those conversations are yet to be had in conjunction with all of those individuals and representatives.
So right now, that one plot is just 21-199.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And Alders, you may recall that since we dissolved EDA, that's why this item's in front of us, because we're taking on some of those old responsibilities of EDA. Just for clarity's sake, and because this is outside of the purview of RDA, because it's not RDA owned land, that's why we're here.
I was wondering that, so
Yep.
thank you for answering, Brian.
Rebecca, and we have obviously two requests here for planning options. They're both, I think they're both attached to this parcel, right?
They
So-
are.
So this is 35 acres. You got a 15-acre request, a 5-acre request. Do you know how much is wetland? And is there anything left over after that? If this all came
There-
together and parceled it out?
There is some wetland, I'm not sure of the exact
Mhm.
amount. We are looking at, yes, 15 acres for SMET, and then the next agenda item would be the 5 acres being for Jordan fabrication.
Sure. I'm just curious if this 35, by the time you look at those three items, wetlands being the third, if that's it, or if there's anything left?
There would still be, well, let's see, if it's 35, we'd still have about 20 acres, give or take what would be considered the wetland area, which is, again, I don't have that specific number.
Yeah, that's
but
okay.
pretty
And we can talk
minimal.
offline too. I'm just trying to, forecast, when the city might be looking to make an additional acquisition, but that's kind of unrelated to this item, so.
But something to be considered as well,
Yeah.
especially as we're looking at roadways and infrastructure and perhaps what might happen down the road if there is further expansion.
Okay.
I apologize, did you say the next agenda item is 5 acres? 'Cause
Yeah,
it
we're
says-
gonna want to amend
Yes.
that one.
Okay, sorry, I
That's
saw that,
two.
wanted to clarify.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry for jumping ahead. Yeah, I don't have any questions for staff, but
No.
I know that Greg and company, do you guys want to speak to it, or? We can open the floor. It's a formality, but.
Okay, yeah, so we're just gonna.
Motion
Hold
opens.
up, yeah,
Motion to open the floor.
second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Formalities.
Floor is open.
Okay, do I
So
need to
you-
state one with?
Yeah, if you can
Yeah,
come up here,
your
state your
name
name
and
and your address for
All
the
right,
record.
Greg Renault, Smith Construction Services, 2080 Profit Place, De Pere. So we're in,
Greg, could you just come up here?
Sure.
Just the camera and the voice recordings and
I
everything.
have the owners here too.
Sure, anybody that wants to speak on it.
So we're just in the planning stages now. We're trying to see if we can make this thing work. Right now, they're located over on Bridge Street. And I understand you guys would probably like to have that building out over there. So we're working on that now, and we just need a little bit of time to get plans together and get this thing, true pricing to see just where it comes in at and see how we can make it happen. It's really what it amounts to. That's why we need the extra time. If we don't, once we have that nailed down, we can release, that agreement right away. But we don't know at this point how it's gonna lay out. We don't know if we're gonna go wider or longer. Our initial plans show it being longer, so it would be more of that back portion of that property. But it's up in the air yet, because it's so early yet.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a planning option, right? So it's.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty,
It's just that we don't know exactly what that configuration is.
Yeah.
That's why it's planning.
Pardon?
That's why it's planning.
Yeah,
so
So-
do you, I mean, the only thing I think from our perspective, right, that would just, 180 days is a long planning option. Do you think you need that full 180?
probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we do. I just put down 180 days because that's what we did for the last development in De Pere.
Yeah, no, and it's fine. I mean, unless unless we've got a line of other folks, clamoring for that land, that's the only way it even becomes an issue, but,
Yeah.
so it's more of just a broad question.
I'm pretty certain we'll know where it's at within 90 days. And, we need to work on the developer's agreement and see how we can make all that work out too. So
Okay.
there's a lot of questions right now.
Yeah, and maybe a question for staff, Rebecca. Have you had anybody else inquiring about this particular property?
Well, beyond Mr. Jordan,
Which was the other?
which is the
agreement,
one,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
our next agenda item. Those are the two that we've been communicating with thus far.
Okay. Because the only thing I was going through my mind, and
Yep.
Alder Hinkfist, you're in RDA, right? Sometimes we
Yep.
do these as 90, and then we just say, come back and renew.
Come back and-
Right, and as long as you've made progress, usually renewal's a slam dunk. So would you be comfortable with a 90, knowing that?
I think Doug would like to answer that one.
Yeah, I would say,
We'll know by that time.
yeah, 90 or
120?
120. Could
Sure.
we do 120?
If 120 is more comfortable for you, I just
Yeah.
like to keep the window shorter,
Yeah,
make sure
I
that
agree.
everyone's on
Yeah.
task and.
And it really comes down to, how long will it take for that developer's agreement? to work that.
Oh, and
work through
even,
that.
we would treat that totally separate, right? If you're on your path to a DA, like, all this goes away.
Right.
Okay,
So, okay,
so,
good. I don't have any other questions.
okay.
Yeah, entertain a motion to close the floor.
Motion to close the floor?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion
So
carries.
that'll be based on 120 days that was just.
Well, we have to have that discussion right now.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, you're just closing.
Yeah, closing the floor. I guess it's a formality, but, yeah.
Yep.
Look, I'd make a motion to approve a 120-day option, and then, of course, acknowledging that if the developer's made progress but not complete yet, they can come back for an extension.
Yep.
Yep.
Second?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 6.
If you guys want to talk more, let me know.
Pardon?
If you want to talk more, let me know, just because I know you guys are kind of located down in my area.
Yeah.
I've had some conversations with you already, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks,
Great,
Brett.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right, number 6, consideration with possible action to approve a 180-day planning option to Jordan Fabrication and Design for 5 acres of land located on Erie Road, parcel directory 21-199.
Go watch on that to
So,
5 acres.
sorry, yep. Any questions for staff on this, or do another overview? But we
Is
kind of got one.
Is the owner here?
I don't believe so.
To your knowledge, would there be any objection to a 120 similar here?
I believe that would be fine.
Yeah, and they can, again, as long as they're showing progress, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't extend it. But
Right.
It just allows you to free that property up more quickly if there is another serious buyer that would step forward, so. Okay, I would make a motion to approve a 120-day planning option.
Amend it right away to 5.
Yeah, for the 5
5.
acres that aligns with the agenda report. What is it,
Second.
5 point something something?
Okay, all those in favor as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 7, for consideration with possible action on the resolution to approve state trust fund loan application from Board of Commissioners of Public Land, $2 million for financing Southwest Woods Development infrastructure.
Can I ask a question for the attorney right away? We have 3 people voting and one will have to abstain. Does that affect the voting
On this one?
Scary.
for quorum?
Well, yeah, we have a quorum.
One of the others will have to abstain for 2 of the items.
Okay. And Alder
Next.
Galvin.
Can Galvin jump on a more?
Well, and I think I've inquired for what it's worth with the attorney's office on this before. It's quorum to conduct the meeting, but after that, it's just a majority vote, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, thank you.
good question.
It is.
There's a reason I've asked it in the past.
We thought maybe there was a chance that Alder Galvin was going to show up late, and so
Yeah.
we were kind of hoping maybe he would show up by now, but we certainly can move into the next item.
Okay, questions for staff?
No, this is kind of already come through. Move to approve.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so a second?
Yeah, and I have to abstain. The applicant is a member of my executive committee and oversees my compensation.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 8, for consideration with possible action on the resolution to approve state trust fund loan application from Board of Commissioners of Public Land, $5.5 million for financing JBS diverse neighborhood infrastructure park and boulevard. Questions for staff?
Just a quick one. And maybe question, but maybe even just more clarity. Director Ellenbecker, and you and I chatted about this earlier. Because I have actually received a couple of inquiries just about, why the trust fund loan versus the bonding. And could you just provide a brief overview of why that's the path?
Sure. At this point, we are going to the state trust fund loan for a couple of reasons. One, the city of Green Bay is eligible to get state trust fund loan. Now, state trust fund loans have a very simple application. Typically, we can get a loan done in 30 to 45 days, which is much faster than going out for exempt borrowing. There's no fees upfront or at the time of prepayment. There's no prepayment fees. So at some point, if we want to refinance it, if we can find a better rate, or next spring when we are going out for our full bonding, we could potentially take it out again, like refinance at that point if it's practical to refinance. Now, specific to all 3 of the requests that are in front of us, the reason why we're doing these now is all 3 of them want to move forward yet this fall. So I will give you a quick overview, like the one that actually was just approved, Southwest Woods. That TID was just approved at August 27th council meeting. It was a brand new TID. And the infrastructure for this one, they want to be moving dirt by this fall. And so the increment from this new development will pay for this loan. And so again, that's why we're looking to do this one this fall. The item that we're on right now is a JBS. That is the brand new TID 28, which was also approved at August 27th council meeting. At this point, there are 2 contracts that are in the process of being let. A $6.2 million one for a phase 2 and a $3.9 million out for phase 1. A $10 million worth of contracts are being let right now as we speak. We also, the city got a $5 million grant from, it's a neighborhood investment grant. We received it in 2021, and the timing is that the money has to be spent by December of 2025. So that $5 million grant will help pay for a large portion of these grants, contracts that are being let right now. So that is why we need to keep this one moving forward so we don't miss the grant window. And I'll just talk to the last one. Same thing for last one. The one that we'll be talking about in a minute is that $1 million one for the public market. That is a brand new TID 2029 that is going to council and potentially be approved at council on 9/17. That one also, timing is to keep this moving forward. It is a pass-through grant. So a couple of reasons why some of these, again, just simple for loan application, loan moving forward. Some of these could be taxable, some could be non-taxable. It kind of depends upon what the dollars are going to be used for, so that it would have to be determined if we were to refinance them in spring. But it's really the need is right now so that we can keep these projects moving forward.
And the 6% rate is well below what you get in the market, right? Which is why sometimes this is a desirable path for some of these deals. And of course, when you bond, if the rate's even lower, to your point, you could refinance and get rid of that as well. And economic development is one of the primary users of this thing, so that's why it's a good source. And so when you're looking at the JBS, think of this, to me it was a lot like the shipyard, right? Mm-hmm. It's just, and the TID is what's satisfying the debt on this.
Correct. These are, all 3 of them are going to be paid through TID. None of these will affect any taxpayers' tax bill. It'll all be funded through a TID, through increment, through sources from a TID, not levy dollars, not taxpayers' dollars.
And the city's borrowing capacity by our own internal policy is 50% of our equalized value, right? So,
correct.
So we are at 38%,
yep.
And that number has been on the decline the last several years.
Because it's based on equalized, and as equalized is growing faster than we're borrowing money,
right.
We are right at 38% of the limit that the state will allow.
Yeah, so I bring that all up, right, because there's plenty of capacity there. And just the reality is these kind of projects do require borrowing, so.
One tidbit, I was on the State Trust Fund Loan site today, and the rate has dropped to 5.5.
Nice.
So this is an application. This is not, we will see these documents one more time when it's actually the actual loan document. So this is an application, the loan, they will reflect a lower rate when we finalize the loan.
Yeah, and so, for JBS, obviously, that's the one that we're talking about right now. But again, I liken this a lot to the shipyard, where the TID was created for the shipyard, right? And we borrowed against it to help build the initial cost of the park, and then the new buildings will come in, create new increment that will satisfy that and put that TID right side up. And so, in this case, even if this were to go south, in the worst case scenario, we've got 27 years. Mm-hmm. This is a blighted TID, right? So we got 27 years to figure this out, where you either create new increment with other projects or you transfer in. But with this one in particular, you've got the state grant, right, that's helping fund new housing development here. Mm-hmm. So the increments, I think, even more secure than what we saw in the shipyard TID.
Like correction, it's a rehab loan, rehab TID, but it's still 27 years.
But it's still 27. Okay, yeah. So.
Right, and we just had an update at the RDA, and the TIDs are doing really, really well.
Yeah, and it's a lot of money, and I think the last time the council took this up, like it kind of went through pretty quickly, but I think it's worthwhile to have these conversations so that we all understand what's happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'll move to approve.
I would second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 9, for consideration with possible action on the resolution to approve state trust fund loan application for the Board of Commissioners of Public Land, $1 million for financing pass-through loan to developer of public market. Any questions for staff?
Just to note that I have to
Move to
abstain, this is
approve.
my employer.
Okay, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 10, consideration with possible action on approving up to $78,000 of ARPA interest funding for the purchase of electric locks for 12 park shelters.
You're gonna make Alder Galvin a happy man.
You will if you approve it.
Are these the automated ones you were talking about?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
And how many are they in so far? Sorry, I'm coming on.
And which parks are we looking at?
This is awesome.
We have lots, we're so excited.
Who knew
We're
that
so
locks
excited.
would be the thing that creates discussion?
So we have 37 total shelters in our park system, of which we only have 6 of them with the electronic locks. So we budget 2 per year in our annual budget. And they've been working really well, so we'd like to expand that just to make the bathroom more accessible to the public. So that leaves us with 31 total shelters left, of which about 22 of those shelters are kind of maybe a higher priority than the other shelters.
Just in time.
So what we're proposing is to use funding for 12 shelters with the ARPA interest. And it's about $6,500 per shelter, is how much it costs to install these locks. We haven't selected the shelters yet, but like I said, we have about 22 priority shelters. So we'll equally space them between east side and west side. And we'll pick the shelters where the park use has the most and highest use. And those are the shelters that we'll put them in first. And, you know, if this gets approved, I can then follow up with a list to all the alders of what shelters we would consider for the funding for this.
And the obvious answer of near west, near east side would secure an affirmative vote on this. So
I can give you a list.
Yep, I'm very excited.
I'm teasing. I know you'll prioritize what's appropriate.
Yep.
Okay.
I would ask, if I could, how are you going to determine the ones that need it the most?
Like I said, we'll look at park usage. So, you know, the parks that have active spaces such as splash pads, wading pools, athletic fields, just parks that have a lot of use in them, just from our observation and the various rentals that are done throughout there. We'll focus on those first.
Okay, and we have how many buildings that we could potentially put them on?
There's 31 shelters left without locks.
So we have 4 right now?
There's 6 right now.
6, okay, 18. How soon do you anticipate getting the rest of them up to speed? I mean, do you have an idea for funding sources in the future?
You know, the funding sources are pretty minimal. I mean, it's if we can find other funding sources like this, which are kind of a one-time use, then we'll continue to explore that. Otherwise, we'll, you know, continue to budget, you know, X amount in each budget cycle to do this. Otherwise, the final option is to bond for it, for the remaining portion. Now, what I'd be proposing for this year is, because we'd be using ARPA funding and doing 12 all at once, I probably wouldn't recommend the 2 in our budget for this year. So we'd pull that out of the budget, but we could always reintroduce that in the following year's budgets.
Wait, when you said this year, you mean 24?
Or 2025 budget, the
25,
upcoming
okay.
budget
Yeah.
we're going to be looking at.
So if it is approved through council, how soon do you anticipate having them installed?
It would take several months to get them all said and done, because we're doing it in between other priorities.
Well, I mean, like, we've got a council meeting coming up this month. If it's approved, then we got a bid, right, for them?
We have to quote it out, so we have to get quotes, and then the quotes are gonna be over $25,000, or over $50,000, which
Right.
is where we have to bring it back for committee approval to actually award the quote to purchase the locks. Then there'll be a lead time for it, and then we'll start phasing it in from there. So by next spring, we should have a lot of these installed.
Okay. Do you anticipate, like Astor Park is getting the first, which would mean there's heat in the building, would we keep the bathrooms open year-round?
I believe Astor already has it, so yeah, it is. Astor already has the electronic locks.
When was it installed? Because I was actually looking, well, about a month and a half ago. Does that have anything to do with what happened last night at Astor Park?
You know, the locks are there. I don't know when they were installed, but they're in that shelter right now.
But I'm talking about the fire last night.
Yeah, the fire, we don't know exactly how that played out yet. We're still
Waiting.
researching it,
Okay.
working with the police on that.
Any other questions for staff?
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
I would move to approve with a request, so not part of the official motion. Keep the extra 2 in next year's budget.
Okay.
I think the goal is to make more progress, not stall for a year, so.
Yeah, and try to get them in by the next summer, for sure.
Okay, I have a second. Alder Hinkfest?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Number 11, consideration with possible action on approving the third amendment to the cell tower lease at Fisk Park Del Marcel Stadium, which would allow the cell tower equipment to be relocated to accommodate the Green Bay Public Schools stadium renovations. Questions for staff?
Get an overview, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say
Yes.
something, you give an
Sure.
overview.
So if you recall, the school district had a referendum to do major renovations to Del Marcel Stadium at West High. And then the park committee and city council granted them the approval to do that because Del Marcel Stadium is a city-owned property, but they manage the facility. So as part of that, we did work with them on the design and the layout of the new facility. One thing the school district felt passionate about was to widen the track and the football field from previous dimensions so that they could host soccer games there. Because the field as presented before wasn't wide enough to accommodate a regulation WIA soccer tournament. So they widened it with the hopes that we could work out a deal with the cell tower companies to relocate the cell towers. If you look at the photographs that I attached in the agenda packet, you'll see kind of current conditions. And you'll see that the cell tower is, and equipment is located right where the bleachers are to go. The bleachers that you see in the photograph are on site right now, so this is the widened stadium. And they just couldn't, they had to leave the last section of bleachers out in the construction because we weren't able to work through this agreement with the cell tower company prior to the installation of the entire bleacher system. The reason that it's in the way is because these cell towers used to be behind the bleachers, but because everything was widened and pushed out farther, well, now they're right in the middle of where the bleachers are to go. So there used to be 2 cell towers, which also housed the sports lighting for the field. So we had sports lighting right on each of the cell towers. So we approached both cell tower companies and asked them for permission to relocate the cell towers and the cell tower equipment. You can see the equipment in the photograph in the fenced-in area on the ground. That's like the electric panels and all the meters and stuff like that. The cell tower company to the north, although they had an active cell tower agreement with us, they actually removed all of their cell tower equipment a few years prior. So they didn't have any equipment on that cell tower anymore. So they opted to eliminate the lease with the city. So that cell tower was removed a few months ago because the cell tower had no interest in moving it and no interest in adding any cell tower equipment to that tower.
Question on that,
Oh.
if
Yes.
they're paying us money, how can they eliminate the lease?
Well, we asked them to move it, and it had to be moved for the bleachers in order to put even the first bleacher set in.
So it wasn't that they eliminated the lease, like
We asked them to move it, they said, well, we're not interested in even having it there, so per the terms of the lease, that gave them an option to opt out of that lease agreement.
How many years were left on that lease?
That one I don't know offhand, I'd have to look into it. That one is not the lease that we're talking about today. I'm just giving you a little background information. I can provide that to you for the council meeting next week. But that cell tower lease was eliminated and it's gone, and the cell tower has been removed. And that was their right to do that per the lease agreement. So with this one, I do have an Excel document in here showing what it means financially to the city and what it means financially to the school district. So if you look at that Excel spreadsheet, you'll see that the current lease runs through 2037. And per the terms of the lease, the cell tower company does have the right to renegotiate the lease if we ask them to move the equipment. So that's what we did, is we negotiated this revised lease agreement with them. The original lease that we tried to secure with them entailed moving not only the equipment at the surface, on the ground level, but also the cell tower itself. We were not able to come to terms with the cell tower company with what that would mean financially to the city, as far as how much of a loss of revenue it would be, nor was the school district necessarily in favor of paying all of the construction costs to move it, because per the terms of the lease, we would have to pay for any construction costs for the relocations. But because the school district is a tenant and they ask for it, that burden then goes to the school district and not the city. But technically with the cell tower company, that burden is with the city. But then we do have a separate easement agreement with the school district, which then transfers that to them. So, long story short, we could not come up with an agreement with the cell tower company to move the cell tower and the equipment. So we asked them for a revised agreement where we leave the cell tower in place but just move the ground equipment. Because really it's the ground equipment that's really primarily in the way. You can see that in the photo. So what they're proposing to do is to actually move that underneath the new bleachers after the bleachers are installed, but the cell tower would remain. The school district is definitely okay with that. They obviously would like to move the cell tower itself, but they weren't real thrilled about the cost associated with that move. So this was a proposal that the school district made as a compromise, saying this would work for our needs if you're willing to consider it. So per this proposal, you'll see that per our existing lease, from 2025 to 2037, the city would have gotten $916,400 in revenue. With the lost revenue calculations that the cell tower is saying that they need to include in the lease for this change, that revenue goes down to $760,979. So it's a loss of future revenue of $155,421 to the city if we accept the terms of this lease. Now, in addition to that, there is the real cost of the relocation of the equipment. And the school district has committed to paying that cost. So I do have a note here on this spreadsheet here. That estimate is about $130,000 to move that equipment. Again, that's just a rough estimate at this time, but it's going to be a pretty close number. And the school district has agreed to pay that relocation cost of $130,000. So what we're looking for is really just kind of a split where the city would take on the burden of the lost future revenues, and the school district would take on the burden of the actual cost to relocate the equipment.
The cell tower company doesn't want to move the cell tower, or they're willing to move it if we, the tower, the equipment, we start negotiating with them. We're picking up the cost, or the school is picking up the cost of moving the equipment.
Just to give you a rough ballpark, the cost to move the equipment and the cell tower was close to $1 million.
Okay, so we're not.
And that would have been on the school district to come up with that.
Right, and I get why they would say no. And I get it's gonna be like a tree in the middle of a parking lot, the fans will sit around the tower and watch the game.
And then the loss in revenue with the cell tower removal was also much more significant than this proposal.
What I'm wondering is, why are we giving them a cut on the lease if the school district's picking up all the costs of moving the equipment?
Well, that's a decision that the city council has to make, whether or not you're okay with
But
this.
I'm asking, out of the negotiations, why are they asking for a reduction in what they pay for the lease?
So per the lease agreement with the school district, they are required to pay all costs associated with any renovation they do. So they definitely are responsible to pay the $130,000. Now, it's up to your discretion as a committee and council if you want to put the burden of potential lost future revenue as a cost of relocating the equipment.
Okay, so again, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right. The cell tower company is negotiating or trying to negotiate that they pay less just because they can. I mean, they're not suffering any harm, any loss of revenue or anything else by anything that's going to be done, that's being proposed. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's a fair statement. What I'm saying is I can't answer that accurately because the cell tower company is a manager of the lease of the companies that have the equipment there. So I don't know what the burden is to the people who are leasing cell tower space from the company that is giving us money.
Okay.
It's the cost for them to say yes to this, right, to move it. It's like a lease termination or a
moving the
lease
tower.
modification.
Well, I guess what
Nobody gives them-
what bothers me is if,
The tower's not moving.
I guess, I'm trying to come up with an analogy. It just, I know they have the right to do this. It just, is it right? Why are they doing this? Because they can get away? Yes.
Can I speak up? We actually have quite a few cell towers, and almost every one of them, the cell tower company has come in and tried to negotiate the lease down. Some of them we have accepted, some of them we have not. In every case, they're just saying they're not generating the same amount of revenue as they did when we assigned the original lease. So as the director said, as soon as you open up that lease, they have that opportunity and they can bring that revenue portion
Yeah,
down.
absolutely.
But we've gone through, we have negotiated the majority of them, and again, some of them we've accepted, some of them we have not accepted, and at that point, in most cases, the cell company will say, well, if you don't negotiate or do an amendment, we may pull our equipment off, and then you get zero revenue.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have not had that situation yet, but that is usually what the threat is, that they may pull it. So we have experienced this quite a few times, so the majority of the time, they're just saying is they're not generating the same amount of revenue, and as soon as it's open, they have to negotiate it down because they're not bringing in as much revenue on the tower.
Okay. I can live with that. Thanks.
Attorney Plunkett.
Just to put it simply, it's the cost of the cell tower company agreeing to move the equipment. So even though the costs are being covered, they don't have to say yes. They have a lease in place.
I know that. I mean, if someone came to us and wanted to renegotiate a lease,
Correct.
we
So-
would,
Right. We're asking something of them, so in turn, they're saying,
Yeah.
okay, we'll say yes, you cover the costs, but we also want to renegotiate the terms of the lease.
And that's because we own that chunk of land and
But it's
that,
under a lease agreement, right?
but it's under a lease agreement.
And we get the revenue on an annual
Right.
basis.
Right, but it's not owned by the school system, which is why they're opening our lease, correct?
The lease is with the city of Green Bay for the cell
Right.
tower. Yes.
all right, thanks. I appreciate that.
So I feel like I know the answer. So even though we're just moving the equipment, not the tower itself, it opens up the lease agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask by the picture too, what are they wanting to build in front of? Are they actually going to put stands in front of the tower? Because that looks like a small
When you
area.
look at the picture, the cell tower itself will remain, and the cell tower you can see in picture A, but it's just off of the picture on the left-hand side of B. So you can't see the cell tower in photo B, it's just to the left. So what they're going to do is they're gonna build the bleachers right up from where they currently end in photo B and build right up to the cell tower. And then they're going to move everything within the fenced-in area that you see in photo B. They're gonna move that about 50 feet away and put it underneath the new bleacher section. So in essence, what you're seeing in picture B is going to be all bleachers, and that's all you're gonna see. with the cell tower right next to it. And the cell tower in the final location is actually going to be kind of more towards the back side of the bleacher. So the only view obstruction that's going to happen is the people who are sitting on the very top corner of the bleacher looking towards the end zone. Those are the only view of the entire field that will be obstructed if the cell tower stays. And that's a very minimal amount of people that are going to have an obstructed view with the cell tower staying. But all of the equipment itself will just go underneath the bleachers.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at picture B and I'm not understanding why with the way it's set up now that the bleachers can't go up close to it. The equipment in front, how is that affecting the bleachers?
Then it would be a much bigger view obstruction.
Okay,
Because that fenced-in area is, close to the front of the bleachers, which are lower to the ground. So if you leave that stuff in place, they could do it. It's just, there's going to be a lot more viewing obstruction seating from the bleachers if you leave that in place.
okay.
I would make a
Go ahead.
motion to open the floor to hear from interested parties.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, the floor is open. If you'd like to speak, you can come up and state your name and address for the record.
Cale Polchinski, 2932 Base Settlement Road, Green Bay. I'm the acting Chief Operating Officer for Green Bay Public Schools. And just to kind of comment on the discussion about the bleacher construction with the gear that's currently in place. You did a great job of describing what that was, but we looked at all options as far as building up to that gear, up, over, and around it. And the feasibility of that is, one, very expensive, and two, that would cut seats. So that section that you see missing is about 1,200 seats, which is nearly half the capacity of that stadium. With building around or up to that gear, we're probably, we don't have exact numbers because it wasn't formally designed, but looking at, again, impacting hundreds to about 1,000 seats because of building up and around or just obstruction from that gear. So we have looked at options. The other piece with the tower and the gear at that location, that was the proposed loading zone. So for ADA compliance, we have to have ramps, which is pretty significant where that was. That would shift that loading zone to a vomitorium within the bleachers, which would again eliminate more seats. So again, kind of all the iterations we've went through, really this is the best option to limit the capacity. And the reason I think the capacity is such a big issue as well for not only the district but the community is hosting events and what we're able to host there. It makes it a more attractive location for WIA state tournaments and things like that, as well as larger capacity contests and things that could happen there. So just a little feedback on the bleachers.
Did you, I mean, when you guys were going through the architectural engineering design process, did you not anticipate the obstruction? Like, when did that come about?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak exactly to that because I was not here during that time. My start date was July 1 with the district. I tried to get some information on that. I think what happens as you design that too, what was noted, that track widening, again, was a WIA requirement to host certain tournaments and state events. So that track also did widen to accommodate that, along with the athletic field. So I can't.
It's just surprising to me, right? Because normally when you go through this process, one of the first things an engineer will do is identify existing obstructions. And that becomes part of your plan to have to address that. So Director Dish, I see you
I
raising
can
your
answer
hand.
that. I
Yeah.
was involved with it from day one. I will say that the timeline that the school district had for this project was extremely aggressive. And sometimes working with the cell tower companies don't go as quickly as you had hoped. So I think, good, bad, right, or wrong, I think the school district jumped into this with the hopes that it would fall into place and the costs weren't going to be as extreme as they came. And then once we found out what those costs were, it was so far into the planning process at that point that it was hard to turn back. But there were ways that we could work with the cell tower company to try to renegotiate just a portion of the move. And there was ways for you to work with your consultant to maybe work around the poles. But there really wasn't enough time from the conceptual stage of where the sizing was dimensioned out to the time where it was actually engineered and construction started. It was a really extremely quick timeline.
Okay, and that helps, and look, I understand, part of enough projects to know that sometimes that's how things come together. You know, I think the issue perhaps that, you know, that I look at is the city's being asked, right, to take really $150,000 haircut on a lease where we could just say, we don't want to do it, right? Now, I don't think that's being a good partner, so, you know, I don't want us to get there, but clearly the school district has its own ability to levy taxes, just as we do, and we have different areas of responsibility. Is there any willingness on the part of the school district to absorb the loss that the city would incur here? Right, because otherwise, basically, we're using the city levy to pay for a school district expense.
I think we looked at that, you know, from what the director had mentioned, the starting point at excess of $1 million clearly was a non-starter for us too. I think we got to this point as a partnership with that property. The district has invested millions of dollars into that property to this point already. So yes, are we asking that of the city? We are, but at this point, we felt this proposal was a fair ask of the city in a partnership with the improvements we've made on that site.
Do you know what your budget was on this project?
I do, but I did not bring that with me. I want to make sure on that.
Are you coming in under budget or over budget?
That was over budget, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a very tight site logistically to work with. And clearly, as you see, we've been delayed a little bit as well, so it's been a difficult site.
Okay.
And the one thing I do want to point out is, you know, the lost future revenue potential doesn't come until 2028, which is 3 years down the road. So we're not going to see any change in what our expectations were for the revenue for the cell tower lease until 2028.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Dan. You know, I'm looking at this, right, and it's $155,000, right? And look, one of the things that's not contemplated here is an index for inflation, right? So that 155 in theory would probably go down, right? What's that number, 130 maybe in today's cash equivalent? I don't know. But it's, you know, to me, it goes back to the principle of you know, we have authorization through the state legislature, right, to have our own levies for our own expenses. And this one was clearly not something, I mean, the city had an agreement in place, and you know, we're being asked to open that up and make the sacrifice. That's why I say, like, I want to be a good partner. I think it's important that we do that. But I think that those, you know, those verticals are delineated for a reason, right? City, county, tech college, and the city. And so this is the city taxpayers that will be asked to absorb this, and we'll have to have that discussion. But that's why I want to know if there was capacity or willingness on behalf of the school district to contemplate what that would look like to make the city whole in that area, even if it is over a period of time. You know, as a hypothetical, if we said, you know, hey, we'll assign this lease to you, you know, the cost is $100,000. I don't know, is that something that the school district would consider?
I would bring that back for discussion. Again, we've had quite a bit of discussion to get to this point. And even this was a difficult one, investing additional dollars to move that equipment. So that investment is still, again, our burden as well. But like I said, with the cost of that project and what I think we're bringing to the city by improving that site, I think is a partnership that we've invested millions, again, into that site. And we felt comfortable with this ask. But to answer your question, if that's what you're asking of me, I would bring that back to our district and have that conversation if that's what's needed.
Sure. And I want to be clear, like, we're going to figure this out, right? We're partners in this for the long run, and we have to figure this out. And it's about being a good, like I said, a good partner. And I never want parochialism to kind of take over making good holistic decisions for our community. But obviously, we're elected to represent city taxpayers, and so if we don't ask these questions, I think we're derelict in our duties. That is a conversation at least I would like to explore, knowing that the outcome has to be what everyone thinks it should be. It's just kind of what does it look like in the middle? Yeah.
Can I ask, were there other, obviously, once the expense was discovered with this, other designs that came up with the stands? I mean, realistically, I know stands, we don't love them in the end zone, but look at big college and professional football stadiums, they wrap all the way around. It's not, out of the ordinary to see them that way. And it's hard to tell from this picture, but how much room is on the left of the tower to extend, on the other side of it? Have all those options been exhausted?
Yeah, that site's really tight, so we can't have, like, for instance, the away bleachers on the other side is all residential property, so there's no room there. Putting bleachers within the track causes issues for track maintenance behaviors during football games, things like that. So, and then extending out to where you said to the other side of the tower, that's really the only plaza area, for ticketing and concessions and things like that. So again, it's a pretty tight site. We explored some options even for temporary seating, and we really couldn't land on a temporary seating arrangements that would work. So that'd be kind of my answer of why we can't do a permanent solution, because of the size of the site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for our speaker?
Motion to close the floor?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, the floor is now closed. I guess, I don't know, it's hard, I know the other tower's not the agenda item, but this isn't the only lost revenue that we are facing. That other lease was terminated as well, and we don't know what that dollar is, so it is more than just what we're looking at, and that's something we have to answer to our constituents, what we're giving up as revenue. And as we come to budget, we talk all the time about revenue, and it's tough. We're in another tough position, I think.
My concern here is, mistakes happen, but this is a pretty darn expensive mistake. And I don't know, like you said, you don't know, you weren't part of the negotiations and everything in the beginning and the planning. But to me, it seems like a huge error in judgment if the thought was, well, yeah, we'll just move the tower and the equipment and we'll start the whole process to get this thing done, and we'll contact the company after the ball is rolling. And at some point you have to say, maybe we stop the ball from rolling. Maybe we don't expand the stadium and everything else if you don't have this information, because look at what it is costing us. $150,000, and like you said, had we never approached the other cell tower, how much longer would that revenue have been coming in? And now they cancel it. So for someone not to anticipate that tower or that equipment would have to be moved, and not to get out there and see what the costs were, that should have been part of the whole proposal. When the school is doing the referendum, they have an idea of what these things are going to cost. They're not just throwing out a willy-nilly number. They've done work on it to come up with it. And for someone to miss that, that's a huge miss. And in the private sector, that could be the end of someone's job, if something like that. And then we've got to go to our constituents and say, the city's going to take this hit on this tower and whatever it was on the other tower. We can't ignore that. At the same time, Alder Johnson, good comments. We are a partner with the school. The school reflects on the city reflects on the school. We are hand in hand in this. And I understand improving that stadium is going to be big for the school, it's going to be big for the area. My kids played in that stadium a bunch of times over the years. And seeing what they can do to make it better for these other sports other than just football and track, I think, but again, it's that balancing act. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, really. But I'm sure we're going to be able to work something out, if not what we have right here. I'm sure that we'll come to some kind of a solution, but it's just, again, I wish we had been able to avoid all this by knowing in the very front end what was going to happen here. Thank you.
Alder Johnson?
You know, unless somebody else wants to speak on this item, because I'm going to make a motion, but,
Go ahead.
okay. So it's, again, I think Alder Galvin has articulated some of the thoughts that I've had, right, which is, and I kind of made some of my points before, but I think it's really important that we find a path forward, because I do think that what you have right now would negatively impact the student experience, the fan experience. I mean, when you're looking at a multi-million-dollar investment in that facility, one that services a big chunk of my district, you know, I think it's really important that you know, the project be completed in a way that the facility can actually do what it's designed and intended to do. And right now, there is a big gap right there that does exist. So, but I have a responsibility and obligation, obviously, to our taxpayers too. And so, I want to stay true to my word, which was we're going to find a way, right, to get there. The city council will ultimately make the final decision on this. We make a recommendation. The city council then will have to do that. So a lot of times we go through this process and there's maybe a piece of missing information that we'd like some clarity on before the council meeting. So my motion is going to entail that to ask Director Ditchite here to do a little bit of outreach. So I am going to make a motion to approve and direct staff to reach out to the school district to discuss two options. One is a lease buyout. You know, that I'm going to arbitrarily say $100,000 because, again, reflecting that inflation index, right, it wrote the value of this difference. And then the other option would be to engage in an agreement with the school district that would reimburse us for the lost revenue until the end of the agreement. So I think one of those two options to determine if the school district will entertain that, and then ask Director Ditchite to report back to council when we meet to see if there's any progress on either of those items, and at that point, it'll be up to the whim of the entire council if they want to absorb this loss. I would point out, you know, again, it's you're talking about a multi-million-dollar development. You're talking, you know, each year, the first 3 years frozen, as Director Ditchite mentioned, right? You're looking at losses after that of 12, 11, eventually you get into the 20s, 19, 18. It's, and I hate to say it this way, it's a rounding error on a construction project that big, but it's still $150,000 right to the city of Green Bay, and I think we've got to find a way to just resolve that and figure out who's going to absorb that. You know, in any type of private sector deal, the tenant would be responsible for that. That's just the reality of it. So it's, but this is slightly different. You know, at the end of the day, it's still the taxpayers that would fund it. It's just, you know, does it affect our budget or someone else's budget, and that's the question. So I would like to see if we can make any progress on that between now and the next council meeting. But that is a very clumsy motion, but I think everybody gets the intent of it.
It makes sense, though.
Yeah.
So I'll
Can
second
you
that.
report the numbers of the second tower by next council meeting?
Sure, I can have that for the
Okay.
next meeting.
I can give you, the 2024 dollar amount was $12,754 that we will not receive for 2024. So that gives you some ballpark. That one is not nearly as big as this one. The annual income, I said for 24 was $12,754. I think it was going to jump up to about $15,000 in 2025.
Do we know when that lease was done?
Nope.
I was going to say,
Nope.
for how much more,
We can get
how
those
many more
financial
years?
numbers. Yep.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, opposed, motion carries. Informational 2024 contingency account, $238,788. Any questions on that? All right, the next Finance Committee meeting will be held on September 24th, 2024 at 4:30 PM. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.